6:15 in the evening, Memphis, Tennessee, 1974. The last light of the day settles across the table beside the window. A ceramic plate is set down, its rim slightly chipped. She sits, opens the low cabinet, takes out crackers, peanut butter, and a brown-speckled banana. The knife waits beside the chair. The recipe box is pulled down. The scent of old wood, dry paper, and vanilla rises into the air. The lid remains slightly ajar, revealing the corner of a recipe card. One card reads fish and bread, another reads beans, 2 sausages, and the last note reads banana, crackers, butter. She knows which can is easiest to open, which slice of bread is still soft, and which bowl is the lightest. A 5-minute meal helps one person keep a place at the dinner table. Meal number 25 begins with a can of fish. Meal number 14 stays warm through the evening. Meal number 2 leaves spoon marks beneath the skillet. Meal number 1 ends with beans and sausages. If kitchen still means something to you, subscribe to Old American Kitchen. Tonight the recipe box opens. Pull your chair a little closer. Canned fish, bread, and meals that netted only a fork. Astoria, Oregon, 1956. Rain taps steadily against the windows of the wooden house. Tiny drops slide down the glass before merging beneath the warm yellow light. The woman in that kitchen had spent many years standing beside the long metal tables of the fish cannery near the mouth of the Columbia River. Once she was living alone, she arranged the kitchen according to the height her hands could comfortably reach. The cans of fish rested on a shelf at waist level. The fork was kept in the first drawer. Bread stayed inside a tin box to protect it from the dampness of the long rainy seasons. The next 4 dinners belonged to the same woman, the same house, and the same rain of that year. Dish number 25. Sardines on toast. The sound of the can lid popping open comes before the bread has time to turn brown. In 1956, in Astoria, a small can of sardines and 2 slices of bread cost about 18 cents. She places the bread into the countertop toaster, waits until the edges become firm, then uses a fork to lift each fish from the salty oil. The fish are placed on the toast and pressed gently so the soft bones break into the flesh. The oil from the can soaks into the still warm bread, carrying the scent of the sea together with the aroma of freshly toasted wheat. The edge of the toast breaks softly beneath the fork, while the center gradually becomes softer and glossier. Cans of fish like these once appeared in the lunch pails of dockworkers, on the shelves of coastal families, and in homes without dependable refrigerators. She knew exactly how long canned fish would keep, how much of the oil should be used, and how much fish one slice of bread needed to become a meal. The little can fulfilled its purpose. Dish number 24. Canned salmon on toast. The aroma of salted salmon spreads before the warmth of the toast. Also in Astoria in 1956, enough canned salmon for one person, served with 2 slices of bread, cost about 19 cents. She turns the can opener around the rim, pours off some of the liquid, then flakes the salmon with the familiar fork. Soft bones are thoroughly mashed into the fish, just as families connected to the canning plants had done for many years. She spreads the salmon across the hot toast. If there is butter in the house, a very thin layer is added. If there is a lemon, a few drops are squeezed over the steaming fish. The salmon has a gentle richness. The toast remains crisp around the edges, and the warmth carries the scent of fish all the way to the curtain beside the stove. Outside the window, the rain continues its steady rhythm, like the end of another work shift. That flavor remains unchanged through many rainy seasons. Dish number 20. Tuna salad witch. The scent of tuna and lemon once lingered inside paper lunch bags carried to the cannery. In 1956, in Astoria, half a can of tuna, bread, and mayonnaise cost about 20 cents. She drains the liquid, flakes the tuna with a fork, then mixes it with 1 spoonful of mayonnaise. A little black pepper is sprinkled over the top, followed by a few drops of lemon juice to soften the richness of the oil. The mixture is spread between 2 slices of soft bread. She presses the sandwich gently so the filling stays in place as it is lifted to the mouth. Mayonnaise makes the tuna more moist. The lemon leaves a bright taste on the tip of the tongue, and the bread keeps every piece of fish inside. Meals like this once traveled in workers' lunchboxes, in food bags handed out from church basements, and on evenings when the person eating wanted the kitchen to remain quiet. Soft bread, salty fish. That was enough. Dish number 20. Cottage cheese with candied peaches. 2 peach halves slide gently beside the chilled cottage cheese. In Astoria that year, half a cup of cottage cheese and a serving of peaches for one person cost about 15 cents. She spoons the cottage cheese onto a light plate, tilts the can of peaches so the syrup drains away, then places the 2 peach halves beside it. The meal remains divided into 2 separate portions, one white and slightly lumpy, the other soft and golden beneath the light. The cottage cheese has a mild tang. The peaches carry sweetness along with the faint metallic note left behind by the tin can. Plates like these once appeared on hospital trays, and during days when the desire to eat had quietly faded. She still takes the plate down, still serves herself a modest portion, and still sits at the table. Setting the meal matters more than having an appetite on that particular day. The plate asks for nothing more. 3 cans, 1 container of cottage cheese, and a few slices of bread have passed through the kitchen while the rain continues outside. The fork is washed clean and placed upside down beside the sink so the water can drip onto the towel. In the next kitchen, dinner will begin with a different sound. Butter touches the hot skillet, the egg white begins to sizzle, eggs, cheese, and the small skillet after the factory whistle. Toledo, Ohio, 1960. As the hour approached when the factory whistle once echoed through the rows of workers' houses, the woman in the small kitchen began preparing dinner. Years earlier, she had sat at a sewing machine, stitching thick layers of fabric into the automobile seat covers. Now the rhythm of that work remained in the way she arranged things around the kitchen. The 8-inch skillet rested permanently on the left. The butter was kept on a small dish. The egg sat in the refrigerator door, while the bag of egg noodles was tucked behind the flour container. The next 4 dishes required very few utensils, but the warmth they gave off was still enough to make the room feel like a properly served dinner. Dish number 21. Fried jig sandwich. The butter touched the bottom of the skillet and sizzled around the egg white as soon as it hit the pan. In Toledo in 1960, 2 eggs, bread, and the butter for 1 serving cost about 14 cents. She tilted the skillet so the butter flowed into a thin ring, then let the edges of the egg slowly turn brown. Some days the yolk was left soft. Other days, she broke it with the tip of the spatula so it would be easier to hold. As soon as the eggs were cooked, she flipped them quickly and placed them between 2 slices of bread. The edge of the egg white cracked lightly beneath the teeth. The hot yolk soaked into the bread, leaving a yellow streak across the fingertips. The browned butter carried the gentle aroma of toasted milk, the scent that once drifted through the modest diners near the factory gates. Egg sandwiches had once been packed into workers' lunchboxes because they could be held in one hand and eaten before the shift began. In this house, they brought a long day to its close between 2 slices of bread. Dish number 20. Scrambled eggs with toast. A fork pulled soft ribbons of egg through the foaming butter. That year, 2 eggs, a serving of bread and butter, cost about 13 cents. She chose the lightest bowl, tapped each egg against its low rim, then beat them with a fork until the yolks blended into the whites. Mixture was poured into the skillet, releasing a quiet hiss. She drew the spatula from the edges toward the center, slowly folding the eggs into soft curds. The bread stayed in the countertop toaster until the edges became dry and the surface turned golden. When bitten, the crust broke with a gentle crack while the eggs remained moist and warm. Steam from the butter rose, touched the kitchen window, and disappeared. As the strength in her hands gradually faded, she replaced the heavier bowl with a thinner one, moved everything closer within reach, and shortened each motion. Those changes were so small that an outsider might never notice them, Yet they allowed her to keep cracking the eggs herself, standing at the skillet herself and serving the meal herself. The 2 eggs were still enough to become dinner. Dish number 19. Grevilled cheese cinch. The faint scent of browning butter spread through the room before the slice of American cheese began to soften. Toledo in 1960, 2 slices of bread, 1 slice of American cheese, and just enough butter cost about 9 cents. She spread butter over the outside of the bread, placed the cheese in the middle, and lowered the sandwich into the skillet. The tip of the spatula pressed gently on top, keeping both slices close together. She waited until the underside turned evenly golden before flipping it once. Browned butter gathered in the corner of the skillet. The edges of the bread became firm and crisp, while the center softened as the cheese warmed. When the sandwich was cut, the cheese stretched into a few short strands before breaking apart, leaving a salty, rich aroma in the air. Over the years, the curtains in the house might change, and the radio might fall silent, but this flavor always returned almost unchanged. Familiarity is a form of warmth as well. Dish number 18. Egg noodles with butter, salt, and pepper. Black pepper clung to the noodles as they became glossy beneath the melted butter. A serving of noodles, butter, and seasonings in Toledo that year cost about 9 cents. Dropped a handful of noodles into a pot of boiling water, listening to them tap gently against the enamel sides. Once the noodles softened, the water was drained, and the hot noodles were returned to the pot. A small piece of butter fell into the center, melting slowly and coating every strand. Salt was sprinkled in with her fingertips, followed by black pepper with its warm, mildly spicy aroma. She tossed the noodles just enough to spread the butter evenly, then ladled them into a deep bowl. The noodles were soft, smooth, and easy to chew. At the bottom of the bowl, a thin layer of butter lingered, holding the heat for a few extra minutes. On evenings when the person eating wanted neither strong smells nor food that was too firm, this almost invisible dish still fulfilled its purpose. The skillet was wiped clean while its bottom was still warm. Eggs, cheese, and buttered noodles had carried 4 dinners safely beyond the old quitting hour before her legs began to tire. But in Memphis, the short walk from the kitchen to the table had grown longer, and the meal would soon have to travel all the way to where the woman was sitting. Peanut, butter, bananas, and meals that came all the way to the chair. Memphis, Tennessee, 1974. The recipe box is opened for the second time. The scent of old wood rises first, mingling with dry paper and the faint hint of vanilla in the grain of the box. The middle is a recipe card marked with a brown grease stain. Written on it in pencil are only 3 words: banana, crackers, butter. Beside it lies a neatly folded grocery receipt and a small note that reads, "Leave the knife beside the chair." The woman had once sat before a telephone switchboard, connecting one call after another with quick, precise hands. Now her finger joints move more slowly, and her knees make every trip back to the kitchen a distance worth thinking about. She takes a light plate down from the lower shelf, places a paper napkin, a butter knife, and a glass of water on the table beside the window. She is teaching the kitchen how to take care of her in return. Dish number 17. Peanut butter and banana sandwich. Soft slices of banana are pressed into a layer of peanut butter fragrant with the aroma of roasted peanuts. Memphis, in 1974, 2 slices of bread, peanut butter, and half a banana cost about 15 cents. She spreads the peanut butter across the bread, slices the banana into rounds, and arranges them in a neat row. The 2 slices of bread come together beneath the palm of her hand. The peanut butter clings lightly to the roof of the mouth. The banana is soft and gently sweet, while the bread holds the filling neatly in place. The meal avoids both the heat of the stove and the weight of a cooking pot, allowing her to prepare it while seated. Dinner never has to leave the chair. Dish number 16. Banana and peanut butter on crackers. The crackers snap crisply beneath the layer of peanut butter and the soft banana slices. A serving of crackers, peanut butter, and banana in Memphis that year cost about 11 cents. She places the crackers on the plate, spreads a thin layer on each one, then gently presses a banana slice on top. Each piece is assembled just before eating, so the cracker keeps its delicate crunch beneath her teeth. The peanut butter sticks lightly to her fingertips. The banana brings a gentle sweetness, and cracker crumbs remain scattered across the paper napkin. The small pieces allow her to eat slowly and rest between each bite. One small piece, then another. Dish number 15. Cereal for dinner. Cornflakes fall into the cool bowl with a light rattling sound. In 1974, a serving of cereal with milk in Memphis cost about 16 cents. Pours the cereal into the bowl, adds the milk, then places the spoon beside it. The bowl is carried to the table in a single short trip. At first, the cornflakes are crisp and break with a delicate crackle. After a few minutes, the milk soaks into each flake, gradually softening them. The coolness of the milk eases the room, still holding the day's lingering warmth. When there is too little strength left to prepare a hot meal, cereal stands between having dinner and skipping it altogether. Sometimes the bowl is enough. Dish number 14. Oatmeal with brown sugar. The brown sugar melts into dark ribbons across the surface of the hot oatmeal. A bowl of oatmeal with brown sugar in Memphis that year cost about 8 cents. She places the oats and water into a bowl, heats them, and stirs slowly until the mixture thickens. A pinch of brown sugar is sprinkled over the top and left to melt on its own. The aroma of cooked grain rises first, followed by the gentle scent of molasses. The warm bowl rests between both hands, sending its heat through stiff, aching fingers. What was usually called breakfast has become comfort on a cold evening. The warmth fits neatly within her hands. The plate is set back on the table beside the chair. She has avoided the heavy pot and the second trip back to the kitchen. Dinner has found its way to exactly where she is sitting. In Gardena, the next kitchen will be even smaller. The memories carried inside one bowl will travel much farther. Instant noodles, hot rice, and 4-minute supers in a rent room. Gardena, California, 1975. The kitchen in the rented room was so narrow that the woman could touch the dining table while still standing beside the electric burner. She had once worked in a factory cafeteria, where trays slid continuously along the coup, and the sound of dishes clinking together lasted through every shift. Now, a single enamel pot did almost all the work. The bag of rice sat beneath the table. Ramen noodles, soy sauce, and tortillas shared a single shelf. There was little space, and there were few utensils, but each ingredient had traveled its own journey before meeting in this room. Some recalled family bowls of rice in California. Others carried the flavors of the working-class neighborhoods in the southern part of the city. Dinner had been reduced to the reach of one arm, while memory stretched far beyond the kitchen itself. Dish number 13. Instant ramen with E.g. The egg white stretched into delicate ribbons through the simmering broth. In Gardena in 1975, one package of ramen and one egg cost about 18 cents. She poured water into the enamel pot, set it on the electric burner, and waited for the gentle bubbling to rise from the bottom. The block of noodles was dropped in, gradually softening as she separated the strands that still clung together with a spoon. The seasoning packet was stirred into the broth. During the final moments, she cracked the egg directly into the pot, letting the white cook into thin ribbons, while the yolk remained soft in the center. The steam from the broth fogged the window above the sink. The noodles were smooth and carried a salty flavor, while the broken yolk made the last of the broth in the bowl richer and thicker. Instant noodles found their way into rented rooms and the kitchens of night shift workers because a single pot was all they required. She set the spoon down. The broth still held its warmth longer than anything else. Dish number 12. Rice with butter and soy sauce. The piece of butter slid slowly across the steaming rice. A bowl of rice, butter, and soy sauce in Gardena that year cost about 12 cents. She scooped the rice into an enamel bowl, placed a small piece of butter in the center, then drizzled soy sauce across the surface in a thin line. The spoon stirred gently, just enough for the butter to melt around every grain. The mild aroma of milk blended with the scent of fermented soybeans, creating a deep, savory flavor that lingered after every spoonful. For many Japanese-American families in California, rice and soy sauce had endured through years of change, preserved more by habit than by recipe. In time, the dish found its way into other kitchens as well. People had rice, a bottle of soy sauce, and whatever butter remained in the refrigerator. In the small rented room, that bowl held more memories than the number of ingredients inside it. Dish number 11, pan-grilled cheese tortilla. The edges of the tortilla began to crisp while the cheese softened in the center. In Gardena in 1975, one tortilla and a portion of cheese cost about 17 cents. She laid the tortilla flat on the counter, sprinkled cheese over one half, then folded the other half on top. The tortilla was placed onto a dry skillet, where the underside released a faint crackling sound. She waited until the edges had firmed slightly before flipping it once. The melted cheese held the two layers of tortilla together. When the tortilla was cut, short strands of cheese stretched out before falling onto the plate. The edges were dry and crisp, while the center remained soft, salty, and warm. The dish could be held in one hand and left with very little to wash afterward. The two layers of tortilla kept the heat sealed inside. Dish number 10. Bean and cheese burrito. Warm steam escaped from the beans as the end of the burrito was opened. That year, a tortilla, refried beans, and cheese for one serving cost about 22 cents. She spread the beans into a thin layer, sprinkled cheese over the top, then folded both sides of the tortilla inward. Both hands rolled the burrito tightly before placing it back into the skillet. Beans carried an earthy aroma and a dense texture. The cheese softened gradually, resting between the warm filling and the dry tortilla. When the burrito was lifted, the warmth remained sealed inside. Beans, cheese, and tortilla came together to make a neat, filling meal, perfectly suited to a small plate and hands accustomed to working quickly. A dinner wrapped up neatly. Noodles, rice, cheese, and beans had all passed through a kitchen no wider than the reach of one arm. The enamel pot was rinsed clean and turned upside down beside the sink. But in Cleveland, the most important utensil would not rest on the stovetop. It waited in the very first drawer, its metal handle worn smooth by the passing years. Canned soup, crackers, and the can opener in the first drawer, Cleveland, Ohio, 1965. The recipe box is opened halfway through the journey. Beside it rests a small can opener, its metal handle worn smooth exactly where fingers have gripped it over the years. A woman in that kitchen had spent many years packaging machine parts. At a factory, she had stood long enough beside the assembly line, surrounded by the sound of metal striking metal and the whistle announcing each shift change. Now everything in the kitchen is arranged along the shortest possible path. The soup spoon, the small knife, and the can opener are kept in the first drawer. The cans are stacked on the lower shelf. The lightest bowl sits at the very front. A small kitchen continues to nourish someone with tools that remain within easy reach. But sometimes all that is needed is a can opener whose blade is still sharp enough and a hand that still chooses to prepare dinner. Dish number 9. Tomato soup with saltine crackers. Crackers break with a gentle crackle across the surface of the red soup. In Cleveland in 1965, it's one can of tomato soup and a serving of crackers for one person cost about 24 cents. She steadies the can against the countertop and turns the can opener around the rim. The soup is poured into a small saucepan, mixed with water or milk, and stirred over low heat. As the aroma of tomatoes rises, the window above the sink becomes covered with a thin layer of steam. The gentle sweet and tart flavor softens as the crackers are broken into pieces and dropped into the bowl. The first pieces remain crisp, then gradually soften and sink beneath the hot soup. Meals like this once appeared on hospital trays, in cafeterias, and around family dinner tables. For her, the simple act of breaking the crackers creates a quiet rhythm for her hands. Break one cracker at a time. Eat slowly. Dish number 8. Canned soup with saltine crackers. The pop of the can lid becomes the final sound of the day. A can of chicken noodle soup and crackers in Cleveland that year cost about 29 cents. She pours the soup into the light bowl, heats it, then crumbles crackers over the broth. The scent of black pepper rises first. The soft noodles slip from the spoon, while the cracker crumbs sink below and form a lightly thickened layer at the bottom. Warmth presses into the palms of her hands as she carries the bowl to the table. Opening a can of soup is a small act, but that act shows she has chosen to sit down and eat. The can is opened. The evening continues. The can opener still rests on the table. One can of chili remains on the shelf. Inside the bread box are bologna cheese and a jar of yellow mustard. The following evening in Cleveland, the same woman will prepare another meal, chili, bologna, and suppers that kept the old flavors intact. The following evening in that Cleveland kitchen, the lightweight bowl still sat at the front. The woman was the same one who had crumbled crackers into tomato soup the night before. The calendar, hanging near the door, still read 1965, and the can opener still rested beside the soup spoon on the table. Outside, the glow of passing headlights swept across the curtains before disappearing. In the kitchen, pulled the last remaining can from the lower shelf toward herself. The familiar motions returned in their usual order, slow, neat, and just enough for the strength she had left at the end of the day. Dish number 7. Canned chili with crackers. The aroma of tomatoes and cumin rose as the crackers broke across the surface of the chili. In Cleveland in 1965, one can of chili and a serving of crackers for one person cost about 39 cents. She held the can close to the table, turned the can opener around the rim, and poured the thick chili into the bowl. As it heated, dark sauce began to bubble gently around the beans and the small pieces of meat. The scent of cumin spread through the room, richer than the aroma of the soup from the night before. She crumbled a few crackers over the top, listening to their dry snap before the small pieces absorbed the sauce and softened. When there was cheese in the refrigerator, she sprinkled a little over the top and let it melt slowly in the heat. Bowls of chili like this had once appeared at truck stops and in home kitchens after long days, when tired legs still needed something hot waiting at the table. A warm bowl after a long road. Dish number 6. Bologna and cheese sandwich. The aroma of yellow mustard clung to the soft white bread. Bologna, cheese, bread, and a thin layer of mustard in Cleveland that year cost about 14 cents. Placed a cold slice of bologna on the bread, added the cheese, then spread the mustard in a thin line. 2 slices of bread were pressed together beneath the palm of her hand and cut in half so they would be easier to hold. The bologna was soft and slightly chilled. The cheese carried its familiar salty flavor, while the mustard left a gentle sharpness on the tip of the tongue. This sandwich had once accompanied factory workers into the plant, wrapped in wax paper beside a thermos of coffee and a neatly folded handkerchief. But long after those work shifts had faded into the past, the flavor returned almost unchanged. Repetition created a fixed point in the day. Every time was just like the time before. The can opener was wiped clean and returned to the first drawer. 3 cans and 1 cold sandwich had become 4 dinners in the Cleveland kitchen. Near the bottom of the recipe box, the next cards were even shorter. Beans, cornbread, milk, baked beans, pimento cheese, and the cards near the ballon of the box, Joplin, Missouri, 1954. The recipe box is pulled down for the last time. Recipe cards near the bottom of the box are shorter, their corners softened by grease and fingerprints. One card reads, beans on bread. The one beside it reads, pimento cheese. Time, temperature, measurements are nowhere to be found. The person who wrote them had understood these meals by sight, by touch, and by the sound of simmering beneath the pot lid. The woman in the Joplin kitchen lived with her husband and had worked in the lead and zinc mines throughout the Ozarks. Bread was kept in a tin box, cornmeal in a paper sack, and buttermilk in a glass bottle. On the lower shelf sat beans and sausages. Everyday meals were rarely called heritage, even though they appeared on the table far more often than dishes reserved for holidays. They kept the kitchen lights burning on evenings when strength was nearly gone. Dish number 5, baked bean toast. The hot bean sauce gradually softens the toast from the center toward the edges. In Joplin in 1954, half a can of baked beans and 2 slices of bread cost about 11 cents. She pours the beans into a small saucepan and lets them simmer over low heat until the sauce bubbles with soft popping sounds. Bread goes into the toaster until the surface turns golden and the edges become crisp. She places the 2 slices on a plate, then spoons the beans over the center until it is completely covered. Aroma of molasses rises with the steam. The first bite still carries the crisp of the toast. After that, the center of the bread gradually absorbs the sauce, becoming softer and richer in flavor. Many people once called beans on toast a light meal. But in a working family's kitchen, it was filling enough to carry someone through the evening. The bread soaks up the last of the sauce. Dish number 4, pimento cheese sandwich. The orange cheese spread holds tiny pieces of red pimento throughout. Pimento cheese and bread in Joplin that year cost about 12 cents. She opens the container, uses a small knife to spread the cheese over white bread, then presses the 2 slices together. The sandwich is cut into 4 pieces to make it easier to hold. The cheddar brings a salty flavor, mayonnaise creates a smooth texture, and the pimento leaves a gentle sweetness on the tip of the tongue. This southern spread once traveled in workers' lunchboxes, through church basements, into many kitchens that wanted to keep the stove quiet on hot days. A single layer of spread carried the flavor of an entire region. She sets the knife down, picks up the remaining piece of cornbread, and pulls the bottle of buttermilk closer. The flour still rests inside its paper sack. On the lower shelf remain a can of beans and a package of sausages. The final 3 meals use even fewer ingredients, but they carry the story deeper into memory. Cornbread, milk gravy, and the last ball, still warm, the dry piece of cornbread crumbled beneath her fingers before the buttermilk was poured. In Joplin, Missouri, 1954, a serving of cornbread and 1 glass of buttermilk cost about 7 cents. She placed the remaining piece of cornbread into the bowl and gently crumbled it until pale golden pieces fell inside. The sound of the cornbread breaking was dry and soft, like old paper being folded. Cold buttermilk was poured over it, slipping through every gap between the crumbs before slowly rising along the sides of the bowl. She stirred once with a spoon, just enough to soften the coarse pieces, while still leaving a little texture. The gentle tang of the buttermilk lightened the dry cornmeal. The chill of the bowl spread into the palm of her hand, bringing comfort on summer evenings when the Ozarks kitchen still held the day's heat. The stove remained untouched, yet dinner was still present on the table. Dish number 2, bread with milk gravy. The spoon swept across the bottom of the skillet, leaving a clean path through the white gravy. In Joplin in 1954, bread, milk, flour, and enough fat for 1 serving cost about 6 cents. She heated a spoonful of butter or cooking fat in a small skillet, waiting until it spread into a glossy layer before sprinkling in the flour. A wooden spoon stirred steadily until the flour absorbed all the fat and formed a smooth mixture. The milk was poured in slowly, in short additions, while her hand continued stirring close to the bottom of the skillet. The gravy gradually thickened, carrying the aroma of warm milk and the black pepper that was added at the very end. She placed the bread on a plate and poured the gravy over the top. The soft center of the bread absorbed the thick milk gravy, becoming tender from the surface down to the bottom edge. This was the milk gravy of working-class Ozarks kitchens, judged by sight and by the feeling in the wrist. No clock could tell her when the gravy had reached the right consistency. She knew it by the trail left behind the spoon. Dish number 1, sliced sauger cooked with beans. The beans bubbled gently around the freshly sliced rounds of sausage. In Joplin that year, half a can of beans and 2 sausages cost about 21 cents. She opened the can, poured the beans into the pot, then placed the 2 sausages on the cutting board. The knife sliced them into even rounds. Each slice was stirred into the hot beans and left to rest in the sauce until the surface of the meat became glossy. The beans were soft, slightly sweet, and carried a faint aroma of molasses. The sausage was salty with a hint of smoke, making the warmth rising from the deep bowl feel even more substantial. Once the meat had been cut into smaller pieces, every spoonful held just the right amount. Children, factory workers, those who had left the factories long ago had all recognized that familiar aroma. This dish held an entire story inside a single bowl. The ingredients kept well, the preparation was brief, the utensils were few, and 1 spoon was enough to finish the meal. It represented the decision to keep taking care of oneself when the day's strength was almost gone. That bowl was still warm. The final 5 dishes had traveled from bread to cornbread, from white milk gravy to beans still bubbling around slices of sausage. By this point, the food seemed to have stepped away from the recipe cards. It became the quiet sound of a spoon touching the side of a bowl, the low light above the table, a chair being pulled out, and one person still sitting down to eat dinner. From Astoria to Joplin, the rest of the journey lived on in small sounds. The lid of a can of fish snapped open. Eggs sizzled in the skillet. A butter knife rested beside a chair. A pot of ramen released its steam. The can opener returned to the drawer. Cornbread crumbled into buttermilk. A spoon left a clean trail across the bottom of a skillet of white gravy. Slices of sausage rested among gently bubbling beans. Those 25 dishes helped one person keep eating when hands grew weak, legs grew tired, and the house fell quiet. A 5-minute meal did more than satisfy hunger. It helped someone keep their place at the dinner table. The table with only one person was still worth setting. At 6:15 in Memphis, the chip plate rested beside the window. The card labeled bananas, crackers, butter was placed beside the card labeled beans. 2 sausages. The lid of the recipe box closed, leaving one corner of paper still showing. The box was always opened at dinner time. If one of these dishes was once served in your grandmother's kitchen or your mother's kitchen, leave the name of the dish in the comments and subscribe to Old American Kitchen. Some meals are very small, but they help a person remain connected to themselves.